So there won't be much budget?
Well, ISAF has a very substantial budget, and yeah, I'll be part of delivering and directing that particular budget. But there are huge resources if they can be delivered in the right way. And it's, I think, not a question of trying to get hold of all of those resources and take control of them, because I'd have to build a bureaucracy to do so. It's essentially playing my part in trying to get those resources directed, because in the end, as I was saying earlier, it's not, we shouldn't be trying to do this directly. We should be trying to do this with and through the Afghan government and getting their brand on any improvements that are there, so that people see them delivering. They don't think this is some kind of external gift, if you like, that will be here today and gone tomorrow. And I genuinely think that's the right approach.
Thank you. There's a lady, yes.
Firdevs Robinson, BBC World Service. Ambassador, what will your approach in your post will be towards warlords? For that, I'm really thinking of President Karzai's reappointment of Uzbek warlord General Dostum. How will you, as a British ambassador, as a new NATO civil representative, approach this issue? And slightly related to that, how do you see Turkey's efforts to bring a regional consensus to Afghanistan issue?
Again, two big questions. I should just say, by the way, I won't be doing both jobs, I'm relieved to say. So at some point in the next few days, I will stop being the British ambassador, and my successor, who will be named in the usual way, will come out in a few months' time. His arrival is being brought forward by about 6 to 8 months. So I will just be the NATO representative from essentially next week, or really from today. In terms of warlords and power brokers and so on, I think, I mean, this is a really difficult issue, and I think we have to look at the way they're conducting themselves now. There is no question there's a whole group of people who have got a pretty awful history in Afghanistan, and who are responsible for all sorts of human rights abuses, from the deaths of I mean, in some cases countless numbers, to the most appalling abuses. And of course, many of those people sit, in support of the government. And it is just worth remembering, as we talk about, reconciliation with the Taliban, that we've got to be careful not to be making hypocritical moral judgments and saying, well, one group of people are absolutely beyond the pale because of the way they conducted themselves, and another group of people are within the tent despite the way they conducted themselves. What we have to do, I think, is look at this as as we look at many other post-conflict situations, including the one closer to home, and one shouldn't draw those parallels too far. But the Prime Minister and Brian Cowen are dealing with exactly, in a sense, wrestling with some of these issues in a different context right now. If we're going to bring conflicts like Afghanistan, civil conflicts, to an end, just as been the case elsewhere, that means some pretty unsavoury characters have to be brought within the system. Because if you don't bring them within the system in some way, at least for a period, then you risk the conflict breaking out. You risk whatever fragile peace you build falling apart again. And so there are characters within the system who, either informally or formally, within the government or outside it, who have got a terrible list of human rights abuses to their name. I'm afraid that is one of the hard choices I believe we have to make in a place like Afghanistan, as has been made elsewhere. Now, future conduct has to be different. If there is an agreement to draw a line under the past, then there have to be clear understandings about future conduct, and that applies to corruption as much as it applies to illegal violence and illegal armed groups. And none of us would wish that to be the case. I would wish it were possible to rebuild a new Afghanistan without that history still being a part of the present. But I think you have to manage the old Afghanistan while you're building the new one. Otherwise, the risk is you never get to build the new one. I think that's true in most post-conflict situations. And it does mean, as I say, some difficult choices, and they're really difficult for the Afghans themselves because they remember the history of that. And I forget the second question.
Turkey.
Sorry? Turkey. Well, I mean, Turkey is an important regional power, the only Muslim NATO country, and has a long history in Afghanistan. and therefore must have a very positive role to play. And there are various regional initiatives out there. Some look more promising than others. Some move fast and then stall. Others, others then catch up. And frankly, any initiative, in our view, that helps to bring together all of the key nations in that part of the world, gets them talking to each other, gets them to start to address some of their shared challenges, and indeed potentially their shared opportunities, which is something we tend to forget about, but they do exist, in our view is well worth supporting. That doesn't mean a particular architecture is the right one. It doesn't mean we should back one horse over another. There are other trilateral processes with others involved. But the Turks do have a positive role to play. They do have an important role in Afghanistan. They don't tend to aggravate some of the same sensitivities as a non-Muslim country trying to play that role does. Equally, of course, there are sensitivities because they have their own national interests and they have some difficult relationships with countries of that region. So they have quite a difficult course to navigate. But from the perspective, I think, of NATO as a whole, speaking with my sort of new job in mind, but also with my old job in mind from the UK, we're very much behind the Turkish efforts to move that kind of process forward.
Of course, some people might say there's a connection between Dostum's rehabilitation and Turkish activities. Not me. There's a lady over there with a hand up.
Ambassador, good evening. My name is Fatma Ayoub, and I work with an organization called the Open Society Institute. And two areas that we focus on, particularly in Afghanistan, have to do with civilian protection and detentions policy. So I look forward to hearing some of your thoughts about how NATO can improve civilian compensation measures when there's been injury or death to Afghan families. But more fundamentally, my point is one about accountability in Afghanistan. Speaking frankly, every couple of years, Afghans feel like the international community is rediscovering the solution to success in Afghanistan, right? So the ANDS and the London Compact was the last manifestation of it, an Afghan-led effort to coordinate civilian and military enterprises in Afghanistan. It fizzled out within 3 years. And the question a lot of Afghans have is just, where did that go and who do we ask about that? For me, the question comes up again when we talk about the future of Afghanistan and trying to work with Afghan partners. And I agree with you completely that the Afghan government has to clean up its own act and that they should be at the forefront eventually of the security initiative as well. But I find it very hard to accept when you have efforts like community defense initiatives, for example, which are managed by U.S. Special Forces and which deal with setting up effectively militias to fight against insurgents in rural communities, or something like now that we have the Reintegration Trust Fund, which actually has now $1 billion in it, according to latest figures. And my question is that these may be good ideas, they may or may not work, but more often than not, they don't work, and we're not the ones who have to live with the consequences of that. It's really Afghans and Afghan communities. So who do we hold accountable when these things don't quite go right? So I'd appreciate your thoughts on that.
I think we have to, I think we genuinely have to hold all ourselves accountable. I don't quite agree with you that the ANDS just fizzled out. Actually, the ANDS, the Afghan National Development Strategy, is still the basis on which, in particular, the development aid is being managed in Afghanistan. But I take the point about, I think your fundamental point about initiatives and different directions and so on is a fair one.